I accidentally posted my bank balance of $10 million to the preschool parents group chat. The teacher immediately changed her profile picture to a sexy selfie. Her status was updated to Lily, single and available. Some parents told me this teacher had a messy private life and was close to many fathers. I trusted my husband, so I didn't care. Until one day, while I was teaching my son about basic manners, he slapped me across the face. "Stop being so annoying. I want Dad to divorce a boring old hag like you. I want Miss Lily to be my mommy." That was when I realized my husband and son had already been bewitched by that home-wrecking teacher. Fine then. I hope your precious Miss Lily can afford to keep the two of you. The payment for a new project at my company had just been wired into my husband's account. I asked him for a screenshot, but he accidentally sent it to our son's preschool group chat instead. I immediately told him to delete it. But it was pickup time, and many parents were active in the chat. People saw it. After a brief silence, the group chat exploded. Holy crap. Was that a bank balance? I only saw it for a second, but I'm sure it was 8 figures. The parents were buzzing. People started tagging my husband, Silas, asking what he did for a living. Some were already asking him for investment advice. Silas stayed vague, saying he was just lucky. I chuckled to myself. He wasn't wrong. When you have a wealthy wife, how can you not be lucky? But then a message popped up. When I saw the content, the smile on my face froze. Leo's daddy, don't forget to pick him up. I'll be waiting for you. Sending hearts. The person's nickname in the group was Lily, single and available. I frowned and clicked on her profile. The photo showed a woman in a revealing outfit, posing provocatively. It took me a moment to realize this was my son's teacher, Lily Rivers. As a teacher, shouldn't she maintain some professional boundaries with the parents? Usually Silas picked up our son, but he was supposedly busy today, so I was going instead. I replied in the group, "Sorry, teacher. My husband is busy, so I'll be picking up Leo today. Thanks for your hard work." I didn't get a response. Instead, a parent I was friendly with sent me a private message. "Leo's mom, you better watch out. I heard this Miss Lily has a very messy private life and flirts with several dads. She's suddenly so warm toward your husband. She might have an agenda." I didn't think much of it at first. For one thing, I trusted Silas. For another, outsiders didn't know our true dynamic. I was the breadwinner of the family. I handled all the savings and every major expense. If someone had an agenda, they would need their target to actually own something first. I got up to leave to pick up my son. But as soon as I got into my car, Silas called. "Honey, I'll pick up our son today. You just stay home and rest." I was confused. Usually, when I asked him to pick up the kid, he was either lazy or busy. Why was he so proactive today after saying he had things to do? A woman's intuition told me something was fishy. Thinking about Lily's message in the group, I felt increasingly uneasy. I drove straight to the preschool. When I arrived, I saw Silas's G-Wagon parked right at the entrance, looking incredibly conspicuous. I spotted Silas and Leo and breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe I was overthinking. Just as I was about to get out of the car, I heard a sugary, high-pitched voice. "Leo's daddy. He left something behind." I looked over and saw the teacher running toward them. My brows furrowed again when I saw what she was wearing. A microskirt, a crop top and black stockings. This was not how a preschool teacher should dress. Combined with her freshly touched-up makeup, I couldn't help but sneer. A young girl's schemes are so easy to read. I stayed in the car, not feeling particularly worried. Silas and I had a great relationship. I even funded his entire college education. Our bond wasn't something an outsider could easily break. I believed in Silas. He loved me. He wouldn't cross the line. But this time, I was slapped hard by reality. Silas and Lily were chatting happily. Whatever they were saying made them both burst into laughter. Leo was jumping around happily beside them. At first glance, they looked like a perfect little family. Anxiety began to bloom in my chest. Suddenly, Lily let out a coy giggle and reached out to adjust Silas's collar. Silas didn't pull away. Instead, his eyes were glued to her cleavage. He looked like he wanted to bury his head right in there. I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped out of the car to confront him, but the three of them got into the car and drove off before I could reach them. I quickly got back in my car and followed. They headed straight for the downtown area. I tried my best to keep up, but I wasn't the best driver, and the evening rush hour was a nightmare. I lost them after a few blocks. I slammed my hand against the steering wheel in frustration. At that moment, I regretted always letting my chauffeur do the driving. When I finally got home, I called Silas. He took a long time to answer. "Hey babe, what's up?" The background was noisy, like they were in a shopping mall. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Weren't you picking up our son? Why aren't you home yet?" "Oh, Leo wanted to play, so I brought him downtown for a bit. Don't worry, we'll be back soon. By the way, don't wait for us for dinner." He hung up before I could say another word. Late that night, the two of them returned, laughing and joking. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Silas even brought me my favorite dessert. When I subtly asked about the teacher, Silas remained perfectly calm. He even admitted that he gave her a ride, because it was on the way. Miss Lily lives in a downtown condo. Since Leo wanted to go there anyway, I just dropped her off. His expression was so composed, as if it were the most mundane thing in the world. I started to doubt myself. Was I really just overthinking things? But that night, I saw Silas's like on Lily's social media post. Thinking back to today's encounter, I know this is a destiny written in the stars. I clicked on her profile. It was filled with thirsty selfies and cheesy, romantic poems. I felt something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. A few days later, I realized that woman was starting to target my son. I first noticed something was off when my son, who usually hated books, started reading as soon as he got home. He even asked Silas to buy him a bunch of classic literature. Every night after dinner, he would sneak into Silas's study. One day, curiosity got the better of me. I stood outside the door to eavesdrop. What I heard made my blood run cold. It was Lily's voice. How much did Leo read today? Teacher is going to check your progress, you know. I'm halfway through. Miss Lily, if I finish, will you really take me to McDonald's again? My son's voice was full of excitement. I frowned, a surge of anger rising in my chest. Because my parents spoiled him. Leo was already overweight for his age. The doctor said it could affect his health if he kept gaining weight. I had been very strict about his diet. And yet, this Lily woman was using junk food to bribe him. I was about to push the door open when I heard Silas's voice. Miss Lily always keeps her word. She'll definitely take you. My hand froze on the doorknob. Silas knew about this? He was actually encouraging it? Then will you come with us, Daddy? I want to see a movie, just the three of us. Well, Mr. Vance, since Leo said so, would you? Lily's voice sounded different than it did in the group chat. She sounded like a shy teenager. I held my breath, hoping Silas would politely decline. Then we should all go together. I was crushed. Silas had agreed so easily. My son's next words felt like a dagger to my heart. Yay. But don't let mommy come. She won't let me eat fries. She's so annoying. My head spun. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. I tried to tell myself he was just a kid and didn't know any better. I was busy with work, so I didn't spend as much time with him as I wanted. But he had always been so clingy with me. Every weekend, he would follow me around like a shadow. And now he found me annoying. I stood outside for a long time, forcing myself to calm down. Leo was too young to come up with this on his own. Someone was coaching him. Silas wouldn't dare be this bold, so the culprit was obvious. I didn't storm in. If I went in now, Silas would just make up some excuse to brush me off. Even if I confronted them, it wouldn't change anything. I would wait until they went to the movies and catch them red-handed. I wanted to see how Silas would lie his way out of that. That night, while Silas was showering, I checked his phone. Sure enough, there were 3 movie tickets booked for the next afternoon. I quietly took a photo of the screen and put the phone back. The next day after lunch, Silas said he was taking Leo out to play. I pretended not to know and smiled. How about I come along? It's been a while since we did something as a family. Silas's face turned pale. He started stuttering awkwardly. Seeing him like this made my heart ache, despite my suspicions. Before the silence became too heavy, Leo spoke up. Come on, Daddy. The movie is going to start. Silas gave me a helpless smile. Sorry, babe. This is a boy's day out. I'll take you next time. I nodded with a fake smile. As soon as they left, my smile vanished. Silas actually had the nerve to lie to my face. Who gave him the courage? Did years of luxury make him forget who actually owned everything in this house? I waited until the movie was about to end and had my driver take me to the mall. By coincidence, as soon as I entered, I saw Silas holding Leo's hand on the escalator. Lily was on Leo's other side, wearing a sweet smile. They looked exactly like a family. At that moment, Silas spotted me. When our eyes met, time seemed to stop. Babe? What are you doing here? Silas's smile turned into a grimace. His voice was shaky. Lily, on the other hand, didn't look guilty at all. She lifted her chin and stared at me defiantly. I ignored her and glared at Silas. I should be asking you that. I thought this was a boy's day out. Why is Miss Lily here? I looked back and forth between them, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Since when did you become so close with her? Silas opened his mouth to speak, but Lily cut him off. Mrs. Vance, don't misunderstand. I promised Leo I'd take him for a treat if he finished his book. He wanted to see a movie, so I came along. As for Mr. Vance, he was just worried about the boy. Lily kept a faint smile on her face, her voice incredibly gentle. But when she mentioned Silas, she gave him a meaningful look. She was practically begging people to notice their affair. I stared at her for a moment and let out a cold laugh. Miss Lily, remember this. You are a teacher, not my son's parent. If you love my son so much, you should talk to me first. Or are you actually interested in someone else? My voice was calm, But years of running a business gave me an aura she couldn't match. Lily's face turned white. She couldn't find any words to say. But then Silas, who usually obeyed my every whim, stepped forward. "Babe, Miss Lily is just a young girl. Don't scare her like that." He was clearly defending her. "She just wants the kid to read more. That's why she came up with this." Lily looked at him with pure adoration. I shook my head at Silas's righteous act. I had always protected his ego in public, giving him all the respect he wanted. But now that he'd thrown his dignity away, why should I care about his ego? She's a teacher. She gets paid to teach. This is a massive overstep. Is it really for the kid? I looked at Silas coldly. Miss Lily immediately took offense. "Mrs. Vance, that's not fair. You ignore your child, so as a teacher, I have to care for him." She gave me a disdainful look. "Silas, honestly, you're too nice to her. You're the man of the house. She's just a housewife who can't even raise a kid. Poor Leo." I almost laughed out loud. Silas was so embarrassed he couldn't even look me in the eye. He must have felt like a complete idiot. Before I could speak, something unexpected happened. Leo, who had been silent, suddenly rushed forward and pushed me hard. "You old witch. Don't talk to Miss Lily like that. Miss Lily is pretty and nice. I want her to be my mommy, not you." He screamed at me. "You don't deserve daddy. You're just an ugly woman." The public hallway of the mall went dead silent. My 6-year-old son Leo stood in front of me with his tiny chest heaving, his eyes glare-locked onto mine, holding a half-eaten bag of greasy fries in his sauce-stained fingers. The physical force of a child's push didn't hurt. What cut through me was the venom in his voice, the exact cadence, choice of words, and arrogance he had absorbed from the two adults standing beside him. Silas didn't scold him. He merely offered a weak, performative "Leo, don't talk to your mother like that," while his lips twitched into a subtle subconscious smirk of triumph. Beside him, Lily Rivers raised her chin, her microskirt brushing against Silas's trousers, looking at me like a victorious queen who had just won a war. "Look at you," Lily murmured, her voice dripping with artificial pity. "Even your own child sees how bitter you are. Mr. Vance, I really feel sorry for you. Working so hard to build an empire, only to come home to a woman who doesn't even know how to smile." Silas let out a heavy, performative sigh, playing the long-suffering billionaire husband to perfection. "Forget it, Miss Lily. She's been like this for years. Cold, controlling, obsessed with work. I only stay for the child." I looked at the three of them. The husband whose entire life, from his university tuition to his bespoke suits and his white G-Wagon, was funded entirely by my sweat and late-night corporate negotiations. The teacher who mistook a corporate wire transfer for a man's personal wealth and decided to throw away her professional ethics for a shot at a golden ticket. And the son I had carried for 9 months, whom I had tried to protect from the rot of unearned luxury, now looking at me as if I were a monster because I wouldn't let him eat junk food. In that quiet moment, the last lingering embers of my warmth, my nostalgia, and my maternal sentiment died. I didn't scream. I didn't slap Silas. I didn't engage in a trashy public brawl over a man who was nothing more than a glorified parasite. I reached into my handbag, pulled out my wet wipes, and calmly wiped the faint smudge of grease from the sleeve of my silk trench coat. "Leo," I said, my voice as level and smooth as ice. The boy flinched slightly at my tone. He was used to me melting whenever he cried, used to me pulling him into my arms and begging him to eat his vegetables. "You said you want Miss Lily to be your mommy," I continued, looking down into his small, spoiled face. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Leo yelled, stepping closer to Lily and grabbing her hand. "Miss Lily buys me toys. She lets me watch TV. You're just an old witch who makes me study." "Very well," I said. I looked up at Silas, whose smirk was beginning to falter slightly under the absolute detachment in my eyes. "Silas, since you find me so cold, and since Leo prefers Miss Lily's care, I won't disturb your family outing any longer." I turned on my heel and walked away. "Hey, wait," Silas called out behind me, his voice carrying a sudden note of hesitation. "Where are you going?" "The driver is outside." I didn't turn back. I walked straight out the glass doors of the mall, where my private chauffeur, Masterson, was already waiting with the door of my black Maybach held open. As the heavy door closed, shutting out the noise of the city, Masterson looked at me through the rearview mirror. "Mom, back to the villa?" "No," I said, leaning back against the leather headrest, opening my phone. "To the central office of Vance Law Firm, and call my head of corporate finance, Attorney Miller." It was time to wake up the man who thought he owned the world. In the top-floor corner office of Vance Law Firm, senior partner Marcus Vance, my personal legal advisor and distant cousin, slammed a thick file onto the glass table. "He did what?" Marcus stared at me in absolute disbelief. "Silas took the corporate advance wire a $10 million project allotment meant for the new logistics park, and let it sit in his personal secondary checking account so he could flex in a preschool group chat. He didn't just flex, I said, taking a quiet sip of black tea. He used my company's capital to pose as a self-made multimillionaire, attracting a gold-digging preschool teacher who is currently trying to alienate my son from me. Marcus let out a dark, sardonic laugh. Silas has really forgotten who he is, hasn't he? 10 years ago, he couldn't even afford the deposit on his university dorm room until you paid it for him. He thinks because his name is on that secondary account, the money is his. He thinks he's the man of the house, I replied calmly. So I'm going to let him see what happens when the house collapses. I set my teacup down with a quiet metallic clink. First, I instructed, file an emergency corporate freeze on the secondary checking account. That $10 million was wired under a temporary operational clearance. Issue a corporate clawback notice immediately. Silas has no legal authority to spend a single dime of it. Done, Marcus said, his fingers flying across his keyboard. What about his personal credit lines? Revoke every single supplementary black card linked to my primary corporate trust, I said evenly. Cancel the lease on the white G-Wagon. It's registered under my company's asset pool anyway. Have the recovery team tow it by midnight. And the villa? The villa is entirely in my name, purchased before our marriage with my personal inheritance, I said. Change the smart locks tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock a.m. while he's out playing family with his little mistress. Marcus smiled, a sharp, lethal expression. And the boy? My eyes flicked cold. Leo wants Miss Lily to be his mommy. Let's see if Miss Lily can afford his $50,000 annual tuition, his organic diet, his private polo lessons, and his imported medical insurance. Within 2 hours, the legal and financial nets were pulled tight. While I sat in the executive suite of my downtown hotel, sipping red wine and reviewing the quarterly earnings of my real estate empire, Silas was sitting in an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. He had invited Lily and Leo to a 5-star dinner to celebrate their victory over me. According to the waiter I paid to keep an eye on them, Silas was wearing his bespoke Tom Ford suit, ordering white truffles, Wagyu beef, and a bottle of 1995 Chateau Margaux. Lily was taking dozens of selfies, posting them to her social media with captions like, "When a real man knows how to cherish you, every day feels like a fairy tale." Leo was stuffing his face with chocolate lava cake, laughing loudly, covered in syrup. Then came the bill. The waiter brought the leather folder to the table. "Sir, the total comes to $6,400. Silas smiled casually, reaching into his crocodile skin wallet, pulling out the sleek, heavy titanium black card I had given him 3 years ago. "Keep the change," Silas said grandly, handing the card to the waiter without even looking at the receipt. Lily looked at him with eyes full of literal stars. "Silas, you're so generous." "Leo, say thank you to Daddy." "Thank you, Daddy. You're the best." Leo cheered. 30 seconds later, the waiter returned, his expression politely neutral, holding the card. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance. This card has been declined." Silas frowned, his eyebrows twisting into an arrogant knot. "Declined? Don't be ridiculous. Try it again. It's an unlimited credit line." The waiter ran it again through the portable terminal. Beep. Beep. Card revoked by issuer. Silas's face flushed red. "What is wrong with your machine?" "Fine, I'll use my secondary checking card." He pulled out his debit card, the one linked to the account where the $10 million had been wired 2 days ago. The waiter swiped it. Beep. Account frozen by corporate compliance. Silence descended on the candlelit table. Lily's enthusiastic smile began to falter slightly. Her eyes flicked from the terminal screen to Silas's sweating forehead. "Silas? What's going on?" It's a technical error with the bank," Silas stammered, his voice suddenly losing all its smooth confidence. Sweat began to bead along his hairline. "Let me call my accountant." He dialed the priority customer service line. A cold, automated voice answered over the speaker. "We apologize. All auxiliary accounts associated with Vance Global Logistics have been suspended pending a forensic audit. Please contact Chief Executive Officer Evelyn Vance for further details." The phone dropped an inch in Silas's shaking hand. The waiter's posture instantly shifted from respectful to icy. "Sir, if you cannot pay the bill, we will have to call the manager and security." Around the dining room, several high society patrons began turning their heads, whispering and smirking at the sight of the billionaire struggling to pay for his steak. Lily's face went pale. The fairy tale was suddenly smelling very sour. In the end, Silas had to scrape together every last bit of personal cash he had, max out 3 small personal credit cards he had kept from his college days, and Borrow $800 from a reluctant friend over Venmo just to cover the dinner. When they walked out of the restaurant, the grand, triumphant atmosphere was entirely dead, and things were about to get so much worse. At 8:30 the next morning, Silas woke up in his guest bedroom at the villa, his head pounding with a severe stress migraine. After the embarrassing dinner disaster, he had driven Lily home in an awkward, silent cab ride, carrying a cranky, sugar-crashed Leo back to the house. He had tried to call me 50 times throughout the night, but every single call went straight to a dead tone. I had blocked his number on every platform. He stomped downstairs in his silk pajamas, intending to demand an explanation from the housekeepers. Instead, he found 4 heavy-set men in black uniforms standing in the foyer, changing the primary electronic locks on the double front doors. Standing in the center of the living room was attorney Marcus Vance, holding a legal clipboard and a pair of white cotton gloves. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" Silas roared, charging down the stairs. "Who gave you permission to touch my locks?" Marcus didn't even turn his head. He gestured to a security guard who immediately stepped forward and blocked Silas with a firm, unyielding arm. "Mr. Silas Miller." Marcus spoke smoothly, using Silas's legal maiden surname. "Before he had taken my family name upon marriage. This property is registered under the sole personal ownership of Mrs. Evelyn Vance. As of 8 a.m. today, your right of occupancy has been formally revoked." Silas froze. "Revoked? I'm her husband. This is marital property. It was purchased 3 years prior to your marriage with inherited assets." Marcus corrected with a cold smile. "It is entirely non-marital. Furthermore, here is the formal eviction notice issued by the district court. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal clothing." "Where is Evelyn?" Silas screamed, his eyes turning bloodshot. "Call her. Tell her to get down here right now. She can't do this to me. I am the father of her child." "Mrs. Vance is currently presiding over an international board meeting," Marcus replied. "She has no interest in speaking with you. Oh, and by the way," Marcus pointed out the floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlooking the driveway. A heavy flatbed tow truck had just pulled up. 2 workers were currently hooking chains to the tires of the white G-Wagon. "My car!" Silas shrieked, lunging toward the window. "That is my car. That vehicle is registered under the asset fleet of Vance Global Logistics," Marcus said, checking off a box on his clipboard. "Since you are no longer an employee or contractor of the firm, the vehicle is being repossessed for corporate liquidation." Silas felt as if the sky were falling on his head. His black card gone. His $10 million frozen. His luxury villa evicted. His G-Wagon towed. Within 30 minutes, Silas was standing on the curb outside the gated community, holding 2 battered suitcases containing his clothes. Beside him stood Leo, wearing his school uniform, rubbing his sleepy eyes, clutching a stuffed bear. "Daddy." Leo whimpered, looking at the heavy iron gates shutting behind them. "Why are we standing outside? Where is my iPad? Where is the driver?" Silas stood in the morning cold, shivering in his thin jacket, looking at his soul. For 10 years, he had lived in an impenetrable castle of wealth. He had genuinely come to believe that the respect he received, the luxury he enjoyed, and the power he felt were all products of his own innate charm and masculine superiority. He had believed Evelyn was just a plain, boring workaholic who was lucky to have a handsome husband like him. Now, stripped of her shadow, he was nothing more than a 32-year-old unemployed man standing on a curb with $600 in his bank account. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Lily Rivers. "Silas, babe, are we still going to the mall today to look at those Cartier rings you promised me? Let me know when you're picking me up in the G-Wagon. Loving you. Red Heart." Silas looked at the text message, his jaw trembling. A sudden, desperate, ugly thought sprouted in his mind. He still had Lily. Lily thought he was a multi-millionaire CEO. If he could just play along a little longer, if he could move into her downtown condo while he figured out how to make Evelyn soften her heart. "Leo," Silas said, grabbing the boy's hand with a tight, desperate grip. "We're going to stay with Miss Lily." Leo's eyes lit up instantly. "Yay. Miss Lily's house. She has McDonald's." Silas dragged the suitcases down the street toward the bus stop, completely unaware that he was walking straight into the jaws of a trap I had carefully laid for them both. Lily Rivers lived in a 400-square-foot, 1-bedroom rental apartment in a crowded downtown district. When the door opened and she saw Silas standing in the narrow, dimly lit hallway, holding 2 heavy suitcases, dragging a cranky, disheveled Leo, her expression froze completely. "Silas?" Lily blinked, her heavy false eyelashes fluttering in confusion. What is all this? Where is your driver? Where is the G-Wagon?" Silas forced a charming, heroic smile. The same smile he used whenever he wanted to manipulate someone. Lily, my love, Silas said smoothly, stepping past her into the cramped entryway, setting the suitcases down with a loud sigh. I had a massive fight with Evelyn last night. Lily frowned, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the dusty luggage. A fight? She tried to control my business decisions again. Silas lied smoothly, puffing out his chest. She wanted me to hand over the management of my new $10 million logistics project to her family. I refused. I told her a real man doesn't let his wife rule his empire. Lily's eyes flicked with a sudden spike of interest. So you left. I walked out, Silas declared proudly, wrapping an arm around Lily's waist, pulling her close. I told her I'm taking Leo and leaving her to rot in that empty villa. From now on, I'm putting my capital into my own independent ventures. He looked around the cramped apartment, which was cluttered with cheap clothes, makeup bottles, and takeaway containers. We'll stay here with you for a few days while my private attorneys finalize the corporate restructuring, Silas added casually. Once the funds clear, I'll buy us a penthouse in the North District. Lily looked at Silas, then looked at Leo, who had already kicked off his shoes and thrown himself onto her small plush sofa, grabbing her pink remote control. A subtle seed of doubt began to sprout in Lily's mind. She wasn't stupid. She had spent years hunting wealthy men. She knew what real wealth looked like, and she knew what a man in crisis looked like. But the memory of that 8-figure bank balance screenshot in the group chat was too powerful, too blinding. She convinced herself that Silas was just experiencing a temporary corporate dispute. Oh, Silas. Lily cooed, putting on her sweetest, most supportive face, resting her head against his chest. You're so brave. A real man should always stand his ground. Don't worry, you and Leo can stay here as long as you want. I knew you were the right woman for me, Silas smiled, kissing her forehead. The first 12 hours were relatively peaceful. Silas spent the afternoon making calls to his old high school friends, trying to borrow money under the guise of temporary liquidity issues, while Lily cooked a simple dinner. By evening, the first real crack in the wall appeared. Leo sat at the tiny dining table, looking at the plate of stir-fried pork and cabbage Lily had set down. He picked up a piece with his chopsticks, sniffed it, and immediately spat it onto the floor. This tastes disgusting. Leo screamed, pushing the plate away so hard it nearly flipped off the table. I don't want this trash. I want organic salmon. I want imported strawberries. Where is Mary? Mary was the private chef I had employed at the villa for 5 years. Lily's face went stiff. Her sweet demeanor cracked slightly. Leo, darling, this is fresh pork from the market. It's very yummy. It's not yummy. Leo shrieked, kicking the leg of the table. You're a bad mommy. Mommy always gave me salmon and fresh juice. I want my iPad. Where is my iPad Pro? Your iPad is at the villa, Leo, Silas said nervously, trying to quiet the boy down. Just eat the pork. No. I want McDonald's. You promised me McDonald's. Leo began screaming at the top of his lungs, throwing his chopsticks directly at Lily's face. The plastic chopstick hit Lily right on her cheek, leaving a faint red mark. Lily's eyes flared with sudden, genuine rage. She was a gold digger who tolerated Leo only because she thought he was her golden ticket to becoming Mrs. Vance. She had zero actual patience for a spoiled, screaming child in a 400-square-foot box. Leo, Lily snapped, her voice losing all its sweet, breathy charm. Stop throwing a tantrum. Eat your dinner or go to sleep. You're not my mommy. You're just a cheap teacher. Leo screamed back, repeating an insult he had heard from his grandmother years ago. Daddy said you're just a pretty toy. Silence fell over the cramped kitchen like a heavy hammer. Silas's face went dead white. Lao! Shut up. Lily turned her head slowly, looking at Silas with an expression that could cut glass. A pretty toy? Is that what you call me behind my back, Silas? No. Of course not. He's just a child. He's making things up. Silas stammered, frantically sweating through his shirt. Before Lily could explode, a loud, heavy knock shattered the tension from the front door. Bang! 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 Open up. Preschool board audit. Lily's face went pale. She rushed to the door and pulled it open. Standing in the narrow hallway was the principal of St. Jude's Preschool, accompanied by 3 senior members of the Parent-Teacher Association, all wealthy, influential women whose husbands held major shares in the city's commercial banks. Behind them stood Masterson, my private driver, holding a sleek black tablet. Principal Davis? Lily stammered, instinctively trying to block the view of her messy apartment. What are you doing here? Principal Davis didn't look at Lily. She looked straight past her into the apartment where Silas was standing in his socks, and Leo was sitting on the floor crying. Miss Rivers, Principal Davis spoke, her voice ringing with cold, professional disgust. 30 minutes ago, the Board of Trustees received a formal ethics complaint filed by Chief Executive Officer Evelyn Vance. Lily's heart dropped into her stomach. Evelyn? Principal Davis pulled out a printed file. The complaint includes verified digital logs showing that you used your position as a classroom lead to solicit private meetings with a married parent, accepted unofficial financial gifts, and actively encouraged a 6-year-old child to disrespect his mother in exchange for fast food and entertainment. That's a lie, Lily shrieked, her voice turning shrill. Silas and I are in a consensual relationship. He's divorcing his wife. Consensual relationship or not, Miss Rivers, one of the PTA mothers stepped forward, her eyes filled with utter contempt. You updated your official school profile to single and available, while actively messaging married fathers in the school group chat. You have brought severe reputational damage to St. Jude's. Principal Davis handed her an official envelope. You are terminated effective immediately. Your teaching certification has been flagged for a morality review with the State Board of Education. Furthermore, Principal Davis turned her gaze to Silas. Mr. Miller, Mrs. Vance has formally withdrawn her corporate foundation's $2 million annual endowment to our school. As per her explicit instructions, Leo Vance has been officially unenrolled from St. Jude's. Silas gasped. Unenrolled? St. Jude's is an elite private institution funded by corporate benefactors. Principal Davis said coldly. Since you no longer possess the financial standing or corporate sponsorship required to maintain his seat, his place has been given to a candidate on the waiting list. She looked at the messy apartment, the crying child, and the 2 panicked adults. Good evening. The principal and the PTA board turned on their heels and walked down the hall, leaving the door wide open to the cold corridor draft. Lily stood in the doorway, the white envelope fluttering from her lifeless fingers to the floor. She turned around slowly, staring at Silas like a wild beast that had just realized it was trapped in a cage with a corpse. Unenrolled, Lily whispered, her voice trembling violently. Her corporate foundation, her endowment. She took 3 slow steps toward Silas, her face contorted in sheer, terrifying realization. Silas, Lily hissed, her nails digging into her palms. The $10 million. The villa. The G-Wagon. None of it was yours, was it? Silas stumbled back against the kitchen counter, his mouth opening and closing, unable to form a single coherent sentence. Answer me, Lily screamed, grabbing a ceramic mug from the counter and smashing it onto the floor at his feet. Was any of it yours? I was the executive director of logistics. Silas squeaked out, desperately. I managed the accounts. You were a dependent. Lily shrieks, tears of pure rage and humiliation bursting from her eyes. You were a penniless house husband living off your wife's money. She rushed at him, beating her fists against his chest, screaming like a madwoman. You ruined me. You ruined my job, my certification, my life. Get out of my house. Get out. Miss Lily, don't hit Daddy. Leo screamed, running forward, trying to bite Lily's leg. Lily, entirely out of her mind with rage, kicked her leg back instinctively. Thud. Leo was shoved back onto the wooden floor, bumping his head against the cabinet, letting out a loud, terrifying howl of pain and shock. For 6 years, Leo had been raised in a soft, padded world where every bump was met with organic ice packs, private pediatricians, and a mother who stayed up all night holding his hand. Now sitting on a dirty floor in a downtown slum, kicked by the sweet teacher he had chosen over his mother, the brutal reality of his choice finally slammed into his 6-year-old brain. I want mommy, Leo shrieked at the top of his lungs, blood streaming from his scraped knee, sobbing hysterically. I want my mommy. Mommy, save me. Silas fell to his knees on the floor, holding his crying son surrounded by smashed ceramic tiles, looking at the door, where no one was coming to save them. 3 weeks later, the Central Family Court of Minnesota was quiet, lit by large arched windows, overlooking the snowy autumn park. I sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing an ivory-tailored suit, my dark hair styled in a sleek bun, sipping warm water from a thermos. Beside me sat attorney Marcus Vance and a team of 4 senior forensic auditors. Across the room sat Silas. In just 3 weeks, he had lost 20 pounds. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, wearing a cheap, wrinkled suit he had bought off the rack at a department store. He sat alone at his table, his court-appointed attorney looking thoroughly exhausted, reviewing a thick stack of financial evidence. Lily Rivers did not attend. She had vanished from the city 2 weeks ago after her landlord evicted her for unpaid rent and public noise complaints. Her teaching license permanently revoked. The judge slammed his gavel down. Bang! Court is now in session. In the matter of Vance versus Miller. Silas's attorney stood up, his voice hesitant. Your Honor, my client acknowledges that the primary marital assets, including the villa, the vehicle, fleet, and the corporate equity, are non-marital property owned solely by Mrs. Vance. However, my client requests spousal maintenance of $15,000 per month, citing his 10 years of domestic contribution as a homemaker, as well as joint custody of the minor child, Leo Vance. I didn't even look up from my file. Marcus stood up smoothly, adjusting his buttoned suit. Your Honor, regarding the request for spousal maintenance, we submit document evidence A certified forensic audit showing that over his 10 years of marriage Mr. Miller embezzled over $400,000 from Mrs. Vance's auxiliary company accounts, transferring funds to private gambling accounts and personal acquaintances. The judge's eyebrows raised sharply. $400,000? Furthermore, Marcus continued, we submit document evidence B, video and audio recordings from St. Jude's preschool demonstrating that Mr. Miller actively engaged in an extramarital affair, utilized corporate capital to perpetrate fraud and abandoned his parental duties, leaving the minor child in an unsafe environment that resulted in physical injury on October 14th. Marcus handed a USB drive to the bailiff. On the screen in the courtroom, the video played clearly, Silas standing in Lily's cramped kitchen, letting Lily scream at Leo, Leo being shoved onto the floor and Silas sitting helplessly while his son wept for his mother. The judge's face darkened into an icy mask. Regarding custody, Marcus added, his voice ringing with absolute legal authority, Mrs. Vance does not seek to deny Mr. Miller his parental rights entirely. However, given Mr. Miller's current lack of income, lack of stable housing, and history of child neglect, we request sole legal and physical custody for Mrs. Vance, with Mr. Miller granted supervised visitation rights for 2 hours every second Sunday, conditional upon him maintaining a verified personal residence. Silas's attorney looked at the evidence, took a deep breath and sat down. Without saying another word, he knew when a case was dead. Silas stood up frantically, his hands slamming onto the table. Your Honor, please. I was wrong. I was tricked by that teacher. Evelyn, please. Look at me. He turned toward my table, tears pouring down his gaunt cheeks, dropping to his knees right in front of his chair. Evelyn, 10 years. Silas wept, his voice cracking into raw, pathetic shrieks. I cooked for you. I waited for you every night. I was stupid. I thought I was important. Please, don't take Leo away. Don't leave me with nothing. I set my teacup down. I stood up slowly, walked over to the wooden barrier separating our tables, and looked down at him. Silas, I said, my voice smooth, quiet, and crystal clear. You didn't cook for me because you loved me. You cooked for me because it was the easiest job in the world, a job that paid for a G-Wagon, a villa, and a black card. Silas choked on his sobs, his hands reaching through the railings, trying to grasp the hem of my suit trousers. You took my generosity and called it your power, I continued, looking into his hollow, terrified eyes. You took my quietness and called it my weakness. You taught our son that a mother's hard work is annoying, and that a gold digger's sweet lies are love. I leaned down slightly, every word landing like an iron nail into his coffin. I didn't destroy your life, Silas. I just stopped paying for it. The judge slammed the gavel down with a deafening bang. Judgment for the plaintiff. Sole custody granted to Mrs. Evelyn Vance. Spousal maintenance denied. Mr. Silas Miller is ordered to make restitution of $400,000 to Vance Global Logistics within 24 months. Silas fell flat onto the carpet, his face pressed against the cold wood floor, wailing like a dying animal as the bailiffs walked forward to escort him from the room. A month after the trial, the winter snow had begun to fall over the mountain estate, painting the pine trees outside the villa in thick, pristine white. Inside the warm, sunlit study, the fireplace crackled softly. Leo sat at a small wooden desk, wearing a simple navy wool sweater and plain trousers. His iPad Pro, his imported candy boxes, and his room full of motorized miniature sports cars were gone. In their place were books, simple, structured reading materials, workbooks, and a daily chore chart pinned to the wall. He had spent the last month living under a completely restructured routine. Every morning at 7 a.m., he woke up, made his own bed, and set his own breakfast plate. If he threw a tantrum, no one yelled at him, no one begged him to eat, and no one brought him chocolate. Masterson simply cleared the table after 20 minutes. If Leo didn't eat his meal, he waited until lunch. By day 3, the spoiled prince who used to spit pork onto the floor was eating his broccoli and whole grain toast without saying a single word. I walked into the study, carrying a glass of warm milk. Leo looked up from his workbook. The arrogant, hostile look he used to wear was completely gone, replaced by a quiet, cautious respect. Mommy, Leo said softly, standing up from his chair, holding his hands behind his back. I finished my reading practice. I set the milk on his desk, sitting down in the armchair beside him. Let me see. He handed me his notebook with trembling fingers. His handwriting was neat, the answers corrected properly. I checked the pages, then looked at his small face. His cheeks had lost their unhealthy, bloated puffiness from junk food, taking on a firm, healthy, rosy glow. Good job, I said quietly. Leo's eyes flicked up, a tiny spark of real, genuine hope appearing in his dark pupils. He took a hesitant step toward my chair, grabbing the corner of my sleeve. Mommy, Leo whimpered, tears suddenly welling up in his eyes. I'm sorry. I looked at him without moving. What are you sorry for, Leo? I'm sorry for pushing you at the mall. He sobbed, burying his face into my knee, his small body shaking. I'm sorry for calling you an old witch. I was. Bet. Miss Lily gave me candy and told me that if I made you sad, Daddy would buy me a real pony. He squeezed his eyes shut, weeping softly against my wool trousers. I don't want candy anymore, Mommy. I don't want Miss Lily. I want to stay home with you. Please don't send me away like Daddy. I looked down at the top of his head. He was 6 years old. He had been manipulated by 2 rotten adults, but the seed of disrespect had sprouted because I had allowed luxury to cushion his world. Without teaching him the weight of the hand that fed him, I reached out, my fingers gently running through his soft hair, pulling him up, until he was looking into my eyes. Leo, I said, my voice firm, gentle, but unbreakable. I will never send you away, but you need to remember one thing for the rest of your life. Leo wiped his nose, listening intently. Respect is not something people give you because you cry, I told him, looking into his young eyes. Respect is something you earn by being honest, working hard, and valuing the people who protect you. Do you understand? Leo nodded frantically, tears streaming down his face. I understand, Mommy. I'll be good. I'll do my chores. I'll protect you. I pulled him into my arms, holding him close against my chest as the warm firelight danced across the quiet room. The weed had been pulled from his heart. The child was finally mine again. 3 years later, the annual Global Economic Forum was held at the Grand Regency Hotel in the heart of the capital city. Over 500 international corporate leaders, government ministers, and financial titans sat in the main auditorium under glittering crystal chandeliers. On the main stage stood a large, glowing digital screen displaying the award for Global Female Executive of the Year. The announcer's voice boomed over the high-grade sound system. And the winner is Chief Executive Officer of Vance International, Mrs. Evelyn Vance. The auditorium erupted into thundering, standing applause. I stood up from my front row seat, wearing a tailored midnight blue velvet gown, my diamond earrings catching the warm stage lights. Beside me, 9-year-old Leo, looking sharp, handsome, and disciplined in a dark suit, stood up proudly, clapping louder than anyone else, his eyes shining with pure, unadulterated admiration for his mother. Go, Mommy, Leo whispered proudly, hugging my waist before I walked up the steps. I smiled, patted his hair, and walked gracefully up to the podium, accepting the heavy gold trophy from the Minister of Commerce. As I stood before the sea of cameras, looking out at the flashing lights, my gaze casually drifted toward the large glass windows at the back of the auditorium. Down on the cold, rain-swept street outside the hotel, a small group of municipal sanitation workers in bright orange vests were clearing wet autumn leaves from the gutters. Among them was a stooped, gaunt man in his mid-30s, wearing a dirty baseball cap, dragging a heavy plastic trash bin through the rain. It was Silas. After losing the lawsuit, his name had been blacklisted across the financial and corporate sectors. With no degree, no skills, and a court-ordered debt of $400,000 hanging over his head, he had spent the last 3 years drifting between low-wage manual jobs, living in a basement room, eating cheap instant noodles. As he paused to wipe the cold rain from his eyes, he happened to look up at the massive LED screen mounted on the hotel facade. On the screen, my face was displayed in 30-foot high definition. Glory, radiant, breathtakingly powerful, holding a national trophy, surrounded by the elite of the world. Beside my name was the updated corporate valuation of Vance Global, $12 billion. Silas stood on the muddy pavement, the cold rain soaking through his thin boots, holding his broom, staring at the screen. He remembered the day 10 years ago when he sat in a cheap university diner, telling me he wanted to build a future together. He remembered the day 3 years ago when he posted an 8-figure screenshot in a preschool group chat, thinking he was a king. He remembered the moment he let his 6-year-old son push me at the mall, believing I was an old, boring woman he could discard. A sudden, violent, soul-crushing sob tore from his throat. He dropped his broom into the muddy gutter, collapsing onto his knees in the pouring rain, weeping hysterically into his calloused, dirty hands, realizing that he had once held the sun in his hands and had traded it for a handful of dirt. Up on the warm, golden stage, I adjusted the microphone, looking out at the bright future ahead. "Thank you, everyone," I said, my voice smooth, powerful, and ringing across the world. "To independence, strength, and the courage to burn away the rot." The applause thundered through the hall, loud enough to drown out the rain. "Forever,"